All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on what part of the world you are joining us from. I am Alex Faust, your host of Conversations at the Edge, and very excited to be here on a Friday. This is our first ever Friday episode, but we make exceptions for the wonderful Dom Monkhouse. If you're not familiar with Dom, and this is the first time you've had the opportunity and the pleasure of learning from him, he is a scaling up business coach and the secret weapon that helps tech companies achieve explosive growth. He has a track record of scaling up award-winning technology service businesses as a managing director. He grew 2 UK companies from 0 to 30 million in just 5 years. He has a podcast called The Melting Pot with Dom Monkhouse, and his weekly insights from the Management Lab is read by more than 6,000 of the world's top business leaders. He's also the author of a new book called Mind Your Effing Business, which is the topic of today's conversation. I read the book last week, and it had a very big impact on me. A lot of concepts that I was familiar with that Dom has an interesting take on that I'm really just excited to share with the community and dig into a little bit deeper. Today, while there's a ton in his book, I want to kind of focus mostly around the people side. There's some really interesting insights that he has on retention and recruiting. So there'll be a bunch of questions around that. And of course, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat. The last 10 minutes, we will get to your questions as well. So Dom, welcome to Conversations at the Edge. And where are you calling in from today?
Alex, I'm in the New Forest in England.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you here. And I want to jump right in. And when I open the book, the first line of the book, or the second line of the book, basically says most of what we think we know about building a successful business is bullshit. So you really pack a punch in the first line. You packed a punch with the title of your book. Tell us why. Why is most of what we know bullshit?
I think people don't question things that they think they know to be true. And so I meet lots of people, particularly technical founders of businesses, who maybe in their working lives worked alongside salespeople, and they thought that maybe the salespeople got overpaid for the success that was driven by some sort of engineering or technology element of the business. So they've got this sales team now as the CEO or founder of a business, and they really begrudge paying them commission. And I said, well, you don't have to. And they said, what do you mean? So we don't have to pay salespeople commission. And it's like I've told them the earth is flat and they thought it was round, or it's flat, whatever, it's like everything they just never ever before thought that this thing. So it's a belief because you don't challenge it. And so I think there are other beliefs like that. I think I hate appraisal systems. I often say to people, so I'm in with a client and people are complaining. It's December and everyone's going to say, oh, we're so busy. It's year end, it's quarter end, it's a short month, and we're doing appraisals. Oh my God, what a pain in the ass. I said, well, just stop doing them. They said, what do you mean? Said, well, you don't have to do appraisals. Who said you have to do appraisals? And everybody looks at the head of HR, or chief people officer. And I said, why are you doing appraisals? They go, to drive performance. And I say, and is it? And then there's just this awkward silence where everybody goes, there's no evidence in our business that our performance management system is driving performance. Okay, stop doing it, get your time back, do something else with it, do something useful instead. And so all the time people are, my best example, I suppose, it's a bit like bureaucracy. All right. It creeps up on you, and it's easy to add and it's hard to take away. Right. So one of my great examples is one of my coaching colleagues, Pete. He said he used to work in a company where unless you put 22 in a box at the top right-hand corner of your expenses form, finance wouldn't pay you. Nobody knew why you had to put 22 in the box. It was just true that if you didn't, you didn't get paid. And I did a session with a client up in Yorkshire a couple of weeks ago. 91 managers in this business were in the room. And I said, okay, we're going to do this thing now called stupid rules. What is the business making you do that is stopping this business grow? And people start putting their hand up, and people are quite tentative. And in the end, I said, okay, what is it I want to say, but you think it's going to get you fired? Come on. And so one of the project managers said, we can't bill in hours. We have to bill in days or half days. And a couple of people chipped in about how ridiculous it was. And we went to the head of IT systems, and he said finance had made this decision 2 years ago when they started the transformation process. The CEO's there, and he said, okay, any reason why this can't be hours? Nobody. So he said, okay, hours it is, make the change. And people are cheering. And the businesses have this inability to challenge, and we have an inability in ourselves to challenge. I think Peter Attia's got a fabulous podcast called Drive. So he's a doctor based in Austin now, in the US, and he's on a drive to help us all live to 120 or whatever it might be, longevity specialist. And one of his stats, which I like, is that in the US, about 50% of people who have a heart attack die from their first heart attack. What proportion of people who've had a first heart attack change their behavior to avoid their second heart attack, do you think?
50%?
About 20%.
Wow.
The other 80% have had what we call a brush with death, which you would think would be a wake-up call, and then nothing. Change is hard. Change is hard. And again, the psychology of belief is really interesting, because if I tell you something, if I challenge your belief, what people do is they double down on their belief. So if I challenge your belief directly, you come back to me even more. Smokers who still smoke. I don't know, that in the UK, certainly there was a whole thing about wearing a mask or not wearing a mask during COVID. Did it work or didn't it work? And both sides sort of very polarized. And it's just so interesting if you can be open-minded and challenge yourself and look at the science, then there's a whole load of stuff that we're just carrying around that's slowing us down, getting in our way.
Love that. Thank you. So I think that, we were just having a conversation before we went live, and you were talking about how much you love to win. And I think that as leaders, entrepreneurs, coaches, that's really this drive to be the best is what drives a lot of us. I know for me, it's something that drives me to continually be learning and reading books. And in your book, you mentioned something that was interesting, that it's not necessarily important to be the best or to win, but it's important to be unique. And I want to talk a little bit about, your insights on being the best versus being unique, and how you see that playing out at like an organizational level.
Yeah, I actually think that I don't care so much about winning, but I hate to lose. So when I was in sales, I wouldn't be, yeehaw, I've won a deal. I'd be like, okay, I won that deal. That's because I did all the right things. And so maybe that's from a Gallup strength perspective, maybe that's my achiever. So not celebrating success and not saying thank you to people are sort of the darker side of that self-motivation. But if I did lose, take a lot of motivate. I then go, okay, why did I lose? I'm introspective on the why did I lose, and then how do I make sure I don't lose again? So it's sort of the other side. But in terms of being unique, I think I often have conversations with certainly prospective clients, and I say, okay, who are your top 3 competitors? Okay. And why does somebody buy your product and not theirs? And there's this long silence. Okay. And why does somebody buy their product and not yours? No idea. Okay. Think about those 3 competitors. Why are you different? How are you unique? No answer. And so, you look at them and their competitors are likely bigger. And so they're thinking, well, how could we ever be as big as them? And I think if you think about Tesla, right? Tesla is, there are a series of willingness to pay drivers. So there is a market for people who want to buy cars. And some people, for some people, there is a criteria which says this car has to be well made. Certainly, if you bought a BMW, you might say the Tesla isn't as well made. But the person who's buying the Tesla is prepared to forgive Tesla's build quality for the other things it gives them. They have a sense that they're saving the planet and making a difference, and they're avant-garde, and it makes them smug. And so that it drives, I'll buy a Tesla for that reason. And the guy who's buying a BMW says, I want my neighbor to hate me for a different reason, because I want my neighbor to think that I'm really, really successful. So I've got my car on my drive. And, you know, those people are buying cars which are doing ostensibly the same thing for different reasons. And so if you look at a company doing, I don't know, I work with a load of managed service providers, lots of people at MSPs, thousands of MSPs. Are you the same or are you different? Well, one of our clients said, we're going to be the #1 MSP for accountants. There's some people who've already gone after lawyers, but everybody thinks accountants are even duller as a segment than lawyers. And so we're going to go and focus on them. And they managed to triple their company in 2 years. And they ended up winning one of the top 10 law firms in the UK as a client. Accountancy firms in the UK as a client. And what they did is they said, how do we get something that gets their attention? So how do we do the saving the planet bit of Tesla when we are this tiny little company in London? And they said, well, accountancy firms aren't very good at technology. And there's this thing called sort of process automation that you can now use, robotic process automation you can use. And at the minute they're typing accountants are typing data into multiple systems. We can map that and automate that. So they can run a webinar or seminar or an event. They can get senior partners from accountancy firms and they can say, we can stop your highly paid people doing menial tasks. We can save you time, save you money, make you more profitable. And they win work on the back of that. And then the desktop support stuff, which is the bulk of their business, they get because they're now a trusted partner. So they've created a piece of uniqueness, which is a complementarity to their main service. And they can sell the complementarity and the main service as a tag along. And so that's a fantastic example of a small business creating some uniqueness you look at 100 managed service providers websites and they'll all just say, we're a partner with Microsoft and we're a partner with Cisco and we do your connectivity and we do your desktop support. And it's like, it's all the same. It's like a sea of sameness. And so to be able to go, let's find a thing that a small group of customers cares about. And that's just massively powerful. And we did it at Rackspace. We did it around service. We said, we're going to differentiate on service. We're going to be the Ritz-Carlton of IT services. And we did that. And that business went on to be a $1 billion turnover business.
Awesome. Thank you. So I promised the community that we would talk about the people side of things. So we'll get to the people. And I want to start with recruiting. I know that there's quite a few different ways in which you've kind of sourced top talent in the past. But when it comes to looking for new hires, is there a #1 thing or a non-negotiable that you're looking for in terms of personality type or experience that you just have a great feeling if they have this thing, they can be an A player in my organization or in a client's organization?
Yes. I think if I'm, and you know what, I don't know whether this is what I wrote in the book. but this is my answer for today, and you'll have to read the book to find out whether it's what I wrote in the book. But I think if you get it all the way down to one thing, and I was only going to interview for one character trait, is that the question? What would that character trait be? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm interviewing for resourcefulness.
That's what's in the book. So
okay, thank God. But that, because I think resourceful people, I'm an entrepreneurial CEO, so my briefings are a bit vague, I've got this big idea and I don't get into the detail. So I'm painting with a broad brush and I'm saying to somebody, there's a thing I want you to do. And I'm pretty vague about what is it? And so the wrong type of person says, okay, can you tell me more about it? Or wants more detail. Then they go away and then they get stuck. So they come back and they tell me they got stuck. A resourceful person just goes, well, I think this is probably what they want. And they just keep going. And then they get stuck and they overcome those stucks and they just keep going. And then I find myself in a position with the teams that I've always managed to attract. And people go, that thing you asked me for, was this it? And I go, no, but that's better. And that's what resourceful people do. They constantly surprise you with something you didn't ask for or a better version of the thing. And I find that's what I'm after. I'm after people who will and that's why I think things like purpose are so important in a business. Because if I give you a purpose, then there is a reason to stay late on a Friday night. We've got a purpose, like there's something we're trying to achieve that is meaningful to us all. Well, I will probably volunteer to put some extra time in. I won't. If I see litter on the floor, I'll go down and pick it up, right? There are things that will happen. I don't know, one of the light bulbs goes out. I want people who go, oh, the light bulb's out. Let me go and find some light bulbs and change the light bulb. I've worked in some companies where, as a consultant, when I started sort of working for myself, there was a company I worked in where one of the light bulbs in reception was flickering for the 6 months I worked there. Nobody cared. It was somebody else's job. And it's just like, this is a terrible business. It was a terrible business. I mean, or you go into a boardroom and the marker pens don't work. People people think I'm odd when I take a marker pen that doesn't work and put it in the bin. It's as like I'm throwing away a marker pen. It doesn't work. When they're finished, you throw them away and you buy new ones. You don't keep trying to use the ones that don't write on the whiteboard. Or chairs that are wobbly. And we'll throw it away. Yes, but then we won't have 6 in the boardroom. Yes, but one of them doesn't work. It's just. Or I say to salespeople, sales leaders, how many of your salespeople are hitting quota? Half of them. And what are you doing with the other half? Well, they're cheap because they're not earning commission. It's like, just get better people. Get better people.
Thank you. So I know that, you're a big fan of job scorecards. The Scaling Up community uses job scorecards. But I read in your book that you kind of take that a step further, and you've generated these job analysis development tools. And I'd love to share what that is and how you're using it and what kind of success you've seen. It seems to me that there are tools that we talk about in Scaling Up, and they're very good, but sometimes there's no mechanism behind that to help the clients fill in the thing. And sometimes clients will say, how do we do it? And it's on some occasions I've said, well, let me help you. And there was one client we were working with in the UK that makes balconies for tower blocks. And actually the tower block gets built with slots in, and they make balconies and they slide them on later. So bolt on from the outside balconies because it's much quicker. And we're working with them, and we did an exercise with them, and we got everybody, we did a half day. We created all the job scorecards in the company in one half day session with the whole company. And we had to come up with a tool that would allow people to think about. So that the tool says, what are all the tasks that you do? And often we find it easier to get the team together, because if everybody in the team has the same team scorecard, like this, if everybody sales or everybody in finance has the same job scorecard, makes it easier to compare one to another. And as human beings, if it's my scorecard, that's very different to your scorecard if you're the manager. So if I'm on the field playing football, I know what the score is. If you're the manager, you've got a different scorecard. How many yards, how many tackles, right? You've got a whole load of different data. If I'm on the field, it's really easy. Like, are we winning? Are we losing? How much left on the clock? And all the evidence says if you can get employees to come up with their own scorecards, those scorecards are more meaningful and people will kill themselves to achieve them. Whereas if you give them a scorecard, they're like, meh, that's your scorecard.
even if the data that you get on the scorecard is the same, people care more if it's theirs and they're involved in the process. And so this is what we're trying to do. So we say, list all the tasks. And then it's like, are these tasks, do they take up more than 5% of your time? Because if they don't, maybe we just cross them off. Would you say these tasks are high impact, medium impact, or low impact? We keep the high ones, we cross the other ones off. What frequency do we repeat them? Daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually? And we cross off the ones that we repeat less often. And the idea is that we're then sort of pull across to the right-hand side this series of high impact, high frequency, time consuming tasks. And we're hoping to get 3 to 5. And if we end up with more, then we go, okay, let's agree which ones are the least important or the least impactful. And then we say, okay, well, is that it? Is that what we'd measure as a team or as an individual? Is that what we're going to be scored against? And yes. Okay. And so can we measure it? Again, lots of scorecards are, it's the what we can measure rather than what we should measure. It's like the drunk man looking for his car keys under a street light, you know. Is this where you drop them? No, but it's where the light is. And so it's like, okay, this is what we should measure. And then getting people in a position where that data is available in real time. And so, you know, I have an example at Rackspace where we had the sales organization in the UK and they were behind goal. And I looked at the data. And so I could see in the data that the best performing person spent 4 hours a day on the phone of an 8-hour day. So lots of managers would go to the team and say, I need everyone to spend X amount of hours on the phone, or what are you doing with your time when you're not selling? I went to the team and said, what do you think is the minimum amount of time you guys should spend on the phone and not get fired? And they went away and huddled, and they came back and they said, we reckon if we're not spending 3 hours a day on the phone, we should get fired. They had no idea what the data was. And I said, well, at the minute you're only spending an hour and a half, so you should all get fired based on your measure, not mine. And what we then did is we just put monitors up on the wall that showed their call times in real time. So you could see where you were in the ranking and how much time you'd put in so far in the day. 3 months later, everyone's doing more than 3 hours on the phone. And actually, we didn't have to do any management. We just had to give people their data. And Gallup did some research a couple of years ago, and only 35% of companies have got scorecards. So most employees in the world have no idea whether today was a good day or not. They were busy, but they don't know whether what they did made a difference in any way. When Gallup do research in those organizations, there is a bell curve of performance. C, D, C, B, A. The C and D performers all thought they were above average. And so, because you don't think, oh God, I'm shit. You think I'm doing as good a job as I can. And if you don't tell me anything else, I believe I'm doing as good a job as anybody else. And so what the scorecard does is it cuts through that sort of fog where you think you're doing a good enough job and you're not. And it puts you in a position where you either have to up your game or leave without what it does is it makes the manager the coach, because you can then go to your boss and say, God, I'm not, how do I succeed here? How's Fred doing 3 times as many, whatever it is, as me? Whereas instead of the manager having to say, Alex, you suck, just give people the data. And so I think that's where the scorecards, even my kids play football, one of them's winning, one of them's losing. Nobody.
You got to clarify that they're playing soccer for our American.
They are
football for the rest of the world.
Yeah, they are 8 and 7, and they are playing soccer in the back garden. But one of them is always winning, and one of them's losing. They never have a game where there's no score. And then we'd send people to work, and it's like, no score. Let's have an annual appraisal. You were rubbish. Try again next year.
Thank you. So I would be remiss if I didn't have the opportunity to ask you about something that was covered in chapter 7, which was my favorite chapter in the book. You talk about test running managers, and you have a really interesting system for not just promoting people to be managers or coaches or leaders in the organization, but actually test driving them in some different ways. So with the rest of the time that we have, I'd love for you to share with the community, what that looks like and how it's worked out for you.
So here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Start with the problem statement. We take a sole contributor, engineer, software developer, salesperson who has skills in their particular thing, and then we inflict the Peter principle upon them, and we promote them into a job above their level of competence. And being a manager is a different job to being a doer. So we don't give them any training. We just say, you've been here the longest, or you're the best. And the only way to earn more money in this company is to become a manager. We make them a manager. Then they fail to be a manager, or they don't like it, and then they leave because they can't go backwards. They can't save face. They can't unspend the money that they're already spending. And so it's like, how do we find people who've got the essence of the management skill that we're looking for, that they can influence people without authority, and they enjoy coaching? And so I would create roles: head of the culture committee, head of the charity committee, head of the staff Christmas party committee. And we'd say, who would like to volunteer to do this role? So it's unpaid. It's going to involve loads of aggro. There is some risk because it could go wrong. But people step forward and they volunteer, and we say, that's fantastic. Put together a team and lead a team to achieve a result. And those people have put themselves forward for management positions. Fantastic. And if we like them and they like the job, then maybe we do some development for them. And then some other things that we've done are, we've said, we're going to put you into the position in a temporary capacity, and we're not going to give you a new job title, and we're not going to give you a pay rise. And then if you like it and we like you liking it, then maybe we can confirm you in the position, because then that makes it much easier to step back if it didn't work out. And I think some of these things are, because if you've got a growing business, your challenge is you need lots of new managers. And what happens is if you don't have a way of developing them internally, you end up hiring the managers from outside, and you bring them in from a competitor, and your culture now becomes that of your competitor, which is what your difference has just disappeared. So, and the other thing you can do is you can do peer coaching, which is another great way to do it. So, because then you say to the employees, who do you think in this business would be a great coach for you? And then you're tapping into the organizational sort of crowdsourcing, the people that everybody thinks has the potential to be a great manager, which is very different from the organizational structure. And spotting those people and creating a peer coaching program can be sensational as well.
Fantastic. Well, Dom, today's been great. I definitely recommend to the folks who are listening, and even if you're not listening, you should read Dom's book. Here's the book, Mind Your Effing Business. Any final thoughts or final words before we let you get on with your weekend, Dom?
Blimey.
The most difficult question. Anything else you want people to know?
Look, we do a weekly podcast, as you say. We do a weekly insights thing, and I get a real kick out of it when people. I mean, I had a guy scaled up his business and sold it. He said, "You've never spent a penny on me. All I've done is listen to your podcast, put everything you've said into practice, scaled my business and exited for a multi-million exit. Can I buy you lunch?" And then it just like makes it all worthwhile. So if the book's helpful and the podcast's helpful and the blogs are helpful, absolutely brilliant.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dom. Appreciate you being with us. And thank you to the community for joining us on a Friday afternoon or morning or night, depending on what part of the world you're joining us from. And we'll see you all again next week.